Canada's relationship with the United States isn't just close, it's unavoidable. $2.5 billion worth of goods cross these borders every single day, and 20 million of us visit annually. It's like a second home. But there's trouble brewing south of the border. Trump and Project 2025. This 900-page conservative blueprint for a future Republican administration, Trump denied having anything to do with it, isn't just a U.S. problem. It could hit Canada where it hurts: our economy, environment, security, and even our identity. Let's break down what this could mean for us. Spoiler alert, it's not pretty. Our country, our world, is changing at an accelerating pace, faster and faster. It may feel disconnected, like hurtling through a maelstrom, but when you peel back the layers, unpack the pieces, you start to see the Canadian connections. Project 2025 was put together by the conservative think tank American Heritage Foundation, with many of its authors past members of Trump's inner circle or candidates for appointment to his new administration. Its purpose is to promote conservative, right-wing policies from a Christian nationalist perspective. What does it mean to Canada? Let's have a look. Canada sends about 75% of our exports to the U.S. That's roughly $700 billion a year. But Project 2025 pushes for economic nationalism, putting America first above all else. If Trump proceeds with threats to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, effectively rewriting or abandoning trade deals like the USMCA, Canadian industries would be in serious trouble. Take Canada's auto sector, a $14 billion contributor to the economy, employing more than 125,000 people. Cars and parts crisscross the border multiple times during production. If tariffs or delays slow that down, those jobs are at risk. And it's not just cars. Softwood lumber exports to the USA were $11 billion in 2022, and the industry employs approximately 32,000 Canadians. There have been years of disputes with the US. Imagine that escalating. When the US tightens its borders, we don't just lose dollars, we lose livelihoods. On a global scale, many economists are already concerned there are signs of an impending recession. Trade wars initiated by Trump's tariffs could jumpstart that recession or push it into a full-blown global depression. Project 2025 echoes one of Trump's favorite themes: tax cuts. It would simplify individual income taxes to two flat rates, 15% on incomes up to $168,000 and 30% above that. The proposal would likely increase taxes significantly for millions of low and middle-income households. On corporate taxes, it would reinstate Trump's 2017 cut from 35% to 21%, and then further reduce it to 18%. It is challenging to anticipate all of the effects of these changes, but it is likely lower personal taxes would increase Canada's brain drain to the US and make talent attraction and retention challenging. The lower corporate tax rate would make U.S. corporations more competitive, incenting some Canadian HQs and companies to relocate to the States. Foreign investment may follow the trends, increasing Canada's challenge attracting foreign investment. Stimulating the U.S. economy could cause the Canadian dollar to slide even lower against the greenback, increasing Canada's competitive challenges. And there will be calls for Canada to follow the U.S. with its own tax cuts. On a longer term, tax cuts could drastically increase America's staggering national debt. Surprisingly, the U.S. already has the second highest central government debt of any of the developed nations. GDP is basically the value a country produces, kind of like its national income. In 2024, the U.S. national debt was over 112% of its GDP, or $36 trillion. This is surpassed only by Japan at 205% of GDP. Canada is comparatively low at 50% of GDP. Just reinstating the 2017 corporate tax cut would increase annual deficits by somewhere between $3.6 trillion and $6.6 trillion per year. At some point, investors will start to worry about this debt, pushing up interest rates and potentially lowering the value of the US dollar, and generally increasing economic instability. Given that Trump-owned properties have declared bankruptcy 6 times, we probably shouldn't be counting on him to successfully navigate the world's largest economy. Here's where things get messy. Project 2025 calls for slashing environmental regulations, reviving coal, and expanding oil and gas production. Canada might sell more oil to the US, sure, but at what cost? We already know transboundary pollution is a problem. According to a 2022 report, nearly 50% of the smog in southern Ontario comes from US sources. Imagine what happens if the US stops caring about emissions altogether. And then there's climate leadership, or lack thereof. Canada has pledged to cut emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. How do we meet those goals when our biggest partner is sprinting in the opposite direction? Trump says he will pull the USA out of the Paris Climate Accord, again, and gut all green initiatives. Do we double down on renewables, or let ourselves get dragged back into the fossil fuel era? We may have gone past peak Greta politically, but that does not change the scientific facts of climate change. Our kids will live with the consequences of our decisions. These aren't hypothetical questions. They're the choices we'll have to make. The US is already tightening immigration policies, but Project 2025 wants to go even further, reducing legal immigration, restricting asylum, and building more walls. Texas has already offered 1,400 acres to build a massive detention facility to process undocumented migrants. For Canada, this means pressure. In 2022, nearly 40,000 asylum seekers crossed at Roxham Road in Quebec, many fleeing stricter US policies. If Project 2025 slams the door even harder, that number could skyrocket. We're already struggling with housing shortages and our social services are stretched thin. This isn't just a Quebec issue, it's a national one. Are we ready for it? Probably not. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, opening up shipping lanes, resource opportunities, and geopolitical tensions. Project 2025 pushes for more Arctic development, oil, gas, minerals, without much regard for the environmental fallout. For Canada, this is dangerous. We already have disputes with the US over Arctic waters. The US filed its extended continental shelf claim with the United Nations in late 2023, claiming a large chunk of the Beaufort Sea floor. If they ramp up development, we could find ourselves outmaneuvered in our own backyard. In 2019, the US conducted more Arctic operations than Canada. Let that sink in. They're outpacing us in our Arctic. If we don't invest in defense and diplomacy, we'll lose both control and credibility. Canada launched its Arctic foreign policy in December 2024, attempting to strengthen Canada's position in the region, but the challenges with the Trump administration's goals are clear. Canada often mirrors US cultural and political trends, and Project 2025 could amplify this. If their politics swing hard to the right, expect similar movements here. We've already seen it with the Freedom Convoy protests, where US-based funding and rhetoric fueled Canadian divisions. When I started researching this video, my greatest concern was the economic impact on Canada. Now, I am more concerned about the cultural and social spillover. Project 2025 is, in some ways, an afterthought for Trump. His policies have been a ramshackle, disjointed mess of anger and grievances. Project 2025 attempts to put some sort of cohesive principles and strategy behind them. That framework is a form of Christian nationalism. The US was created by and for Christians, is exceptional and entitled to world domination. And everyone else can go hang, to paraphrase one of its more forthright authors. It is a scary approach that is out of sync with the vast majority of Americans and Canadians if they actually pay attention to it. That disconnect will come to a boil very soon in the second Trump administration. As the US pushes culture wars into overdrive, we will see, are already seeing, echoes in our debates on healthcare, education, and social policy. It's not just annoying, it's destabilizing. A divided Canada is a weaker Canada, and that's exactly what we don't need right now. Let's summarize. $700 billion in trade with the US could be at risk. Tax cuts could suck people and business from Canada to the US, then destabilize the world economy. Nearly 50% of the smog in southern Ontario already comes from US sources. In 2022, 40,000 asylum seekers crossed at Roxham Road, and that number could rise. The fight against climate change will effectively come to a halt. The US outpaces us in Arctic military operations, threatening our sovereignty. These aren't just numbers, they're warning signs, and they're telling us we need to act. So, what do we do? First, we need to diversify our trade. Fix our own inter-provincial trade barriers. A 2021 report estimated Canada's GDP could rise by $80 billion, or 3.8%, by getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers. And we need to move on increasing trade with Europe and Asia to reduce our reliance on the US. If the USA takes a belligerent approach to Canadian goods, we must be prepared to retaliate and realign our trade. We need to double down on climate leadership, not just because it's the right thing to do for our kids and grandkids, but because it's the economic future. You don't want to be selling coal when the world moved on to oil, and you don't want to be flogging fossil fuels when everyone has gone green. Lead or be left behind. Third, we need to implement the new Canadian Arctic strategy. Sovereignty isn't just about planting flags. It's about showing we belong there through engagement with Inuit, diplomatic partnerships with like-minded Arctic nations, investment, and action. Finally, we need to stay united and resilient. The US is our closest ally, but we can't let their shifts dictate our future. Trump may sneer at Canada as the 51st state, but we have a proud, independent history of standing up to the Americans when they slide into bully mode. Project 2025 is a blueprint for an uncertain future, but by understanding the risks that it brings, we can survive them, perhaps even come out stronger. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, hit like and subscribe for more Canadian connections. Stay informed, stay engaged.